Thank you for joining me on my channel So Stylish with Elsa B, where I share sewing tips with you. Now, if you've been following me for a while, you know that I am the distributor for Schufer Design's pattern fitting system in South Africa. Now, if you do want more information on how the Schufer Design's pattern fitting system works, I'm going to ask you to go over to our dedicated YouTube channel for Schufer Designs. I will put a link below in the description box for you. Just go browse a little bit. There's over 300 videos there all about how you're going to use our master patterns to draft your sloper. There's advice on fitting, designing, everything is there all on one channel to help you to actually sew clothing that's going to fit your body. Now for today's video, we are going to be talking about seam finishes. Now usually when we look at seam finishes, we think immediately of our overlock stitch on our overlocker. We think of our zigzag stitches that we have on our sewing machines as well. But I'm going to be talking to you about the Hong Kong seam finish. That is one of my favorite finishes because it really gives you that designer look on the inside of your garment. Now in South Africa, we've got beautiful warm weather, so if I do make jackets for myself, I don't want to line them. It is just too warm to have lining in my jackets. So there is really one of the places where I will always go and do my seam finish with a Hong Kong finish. Now the jacket that you're seeing here is my Trendy Designer Jacket, which is one of my design-alongs on my Schufer Academy South Africa, where I take my customers through designing and sewing the jacket with me. But I'm going to just take a snippet of that design-along that I've got on my academy, and that is now for the Hong Kong finish, and I'm just going to take you through the steps of how I actually did the Hong Kong finish inside this jacket. Now before we move on to the sewing technique, I actually just wanted to show you the inside of my jacket. Now as you can see, I do have a facing on the back there, and I also made sure that any raw edges that I've got in this jacket is going to be covered with this Hong Kong finish. So you can see I've got my finish on that facing, my seams are pressed open, all those edges are beautifully finished, even the side seams, my armholes, my even the shoulder pad, and then I just wanted to show you here at the bottom as well, my hems as well. Before I actually sew down the hem, I made sure that all these raw edges are also finished. You can see even in the sleeve, everything has been finished with this Hong Kong finish. Now one thing that I also wanted to mention now is that when you are doing this Hong Kong finish, you can really be creative with the inside. You can really go and do beautiful bright colors. I had to keep mine toned down because of the white of the fabric. I didn't want this edge to actually show through to the right side of my garment. But usually when it is a darker fabric or a thicker fabric, then I really go and play with these colors. I used a satiny, it's like a satiny fabric. It's actually, I think this was the Super Soft that I used. Now Super Soft is a fabric we get in our local stores here. It feels like a really soft drapey satin, so I love working with it because there's so many colors available for me to actually use then if I am doing this finish. Before we start sewing our jacket, I just wanted to have a chat about our seam finish that we're going to do. Now we are doing a Hong Kong finish for us on our seam edges. But I just wanted to also mention that you also find a seam binding. So if you've been Googling, you will notice that some people will talk about a seam binding and some of them will be talking about a Hong Kong finish. And if you are looking at that end result, actually it looks the same. The only difference is that with a Hong Kong finish, we have less bulk on that seam. If we are doing a seam binding, that is really working with, let's say, your bias binding or the same effect as a bias binding, where I go and I sew on my strip with my seam allowance, my 6mm seam allowance. We press it over, and then when we get to this side, we actually fold this edge of the binding in as well, and that then gets wrapped over my stitching. And that gives you a bias binding effect if we look at that finish actually. So that is called our seam binding. Now if it looks like that and it's wrapped double on that area, I will just go and do some stitch in the ditch on that area to keep it in place. But I've got an extra layer of fabric on my seam because we've got a double layer here, and because this area has been folded in, that raw edge is folded in and wrapped over, so I do have double fabric on this strip that I have. Now if we are doing a Hong Kong finish, we start off with the same seam. We go and we sew our strip on with a 6mm or 1/4 inch seam allowance. The difference now is when I am folding it over and we're going to this side, I'm not wrapping that edge in. I'm actually bringing that whole edge over, and we've got a single layer now that we are working with. And then once I've wrapped it around, I will go and I will again stitch in the ditch on that area to finish it. Once we've sewn it that way and I've done some stitching on that area, we then go and with scissors, we will just go and trim that excess right next to our stitches, and that is going to then give us that Hong Kong finish, so it is less bulk for us. Now, preparing our back facing, we are going to pin our bias strip that we've cut onto our edge. We are just going to go and pin our strip on. So I just want to move this so I can line everything up. Now, all our strips for the Hong Kong finish, we are going to be sewing with a 6mm or our 1/4 inch seam allowance. Please don't go and stretch this out. I'm really just laying it down so it's flat. You can take your hand, and all I'm doing is really just smoothing it. I do have a jacket that I actually bought where they pulled that finish, that binding that they did so tight that once I washed it, I had all these puckers happening on my seams, and there was just no way of ironing it out. So I am really not going to be pulling, even though it does have a lot of give. I'm just going to smooth it out. Now you'll note that I have pinned a little bit more on this area, and this is because I am working with the satiny fabric and I do want an accurate finish on that area. So now we can just go to our sewing machine, and I'm going to sew this Hong Kong finish with you. I want to take you through the steps of finishing the seam with the Hong Kong finish. Now I have my 1/4 inch foot on. That is going to allow me to get accurate 6mm or 1/4 inch seam allowance. I also went and I put in a brand new number 8012 universal needle. If we have a needle that's slightly blunt, we are going to get skipped stitches. I might even damage my fabric a little bit. Now, on my stitches that I'm using, I'm just going to be using my straight stitch on my normal 2.5 stitch length. I didn't go and make any other changes to my machine. So all we have to do now is just start sewing, and I'm also going to reverse stitch that section, and I just want to make sure now that I have everything lined up with my presser foot. So I do have a marking on my stitch plate there, and I want to make sure the edge of this fabric is actually on the edge of my presser foot. So that is my strip done. So you can see I actually have that 6mm or 1/4 inch seam allowance, and I'm just going to go and I'm going to press this upwards now so that we can go to the next step. I've just pressed my binding up now, and I've pressed it over to the wrong side of my facing. And as you can see, it's actually lying beautifully flat. I've seen so many times when people are doing the Hong Kong finish or even the seam bindings that they don't press. They just fold it over, and when they sew, you actually see little folds happening in your fabric on this section. It really looks very, very untidy. So I want you to please make sure that as we are sewing, I'm not going to be telling you to press all the time, but each and every seam that you're sewing, I want you to please go and press this for me. We are now ready to go and do our stitch in the ditch. So I'm going to now stitch in the ditch. You'll note that I haven't placed any pins, and that is because I did go and press it, and that pressing has really kept the fabric where it should be. If you want to, you can go and pin as well, but if you did a good press, you should be fine without your pins. So let's just start with our stitch in the ditch. Now my fingers are controlling. As I'm watching that needle going in right in that area, I might need to move a little bit. So I'm still working with my 1/4 inch foot. So that is my Hong Kong finished now, and you can see I do have a smooth piece of binding running all on that edge. I don't have any puckers, any folds that happening. So it is really, and I'm going to stress this, it is important if we are doing this finish, I need you to go and press. Now our last step that we are going to do for our Hong Kong finish is to go and trim next to our stitches that we've done. So I'm just going to go and trim now, and you're make sure that you are not going to cut those stitches. So you just want to be next to them. Now, working with a duckbill scissors like this will help you to get that perfect cut line next to your stitches. So I'm just going to go and finish cutting this edge. Now, I hope that this sewing tip is going to help you get a professional finish in your next jacket that you're going to be sewing. Now, as always, when I am finishing my videos, I'm going to ask you to please go like and subscribe to my channel if you haven't done it yet. That way you'll get notifications every time I add new videos for you to my channel. This is also Valentine's weekend. I just wanted to mention it's Valentine's weekend, so happy Valentine. If you're going to be going out this weekend, enjoy yourself. If you're going to be making time for some sewing, enjoy your sewing. We'll chat again in the next video.